Captain Min-jun Park stepped off the shuttle and into the Galactic Commerce Hub with the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. The massive station gleamed with polished metal and crystalline viewports, a monument to interspecies cooperation and trade. He adjusted his worn leather jacket and headed toward the customs checkpoint, his boots echoing on the pristine floor. The checkpoint was different from his last visit 6 months ago. Much different. Where there had once been a simple scanner archway, there now stood an elaborate security station with multiple scanning devices, barrier fields, and no fewer than 8 armed guards. At the center stood Security Chief Threll, a Vexillion whose 6 arms moved in constant, fidgeting patterns that betrayed either nervousness or irritation. "Welcome to Galactic Commerce Hub," Threll said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into flat, mechanical words. "New security protocols require all visitors to surrender weapons before entry. Please place all weapons in the provided containers." Min-jun nodded and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folding knife and placed it in the container. Then, he reached into another pocket and pulled out a multi-tool. Then another pocket produced a small plasma cutter. Then a lockpick set. Then an emergency flare. Then a compact pry bar. Threll's eye stalks stiffened. "How many pockets does that garment have?" "A few," Min-jun said casually, continuing to empty pockets. A signal mirror, a length of paracord, a fire starter, a small medical kit, a tactical pen, 2 more folding knives of different sizes. The other security officers began to gather around, watching with growing fascination and alarm. Min-jun moved to his vest, which apparently had even more pockets than his jacket. Out came wire cutters, a compact flashlight, an emergency beacon, another multi-tool, zip ties, duct tape, a small hammer, a whistle, water purification tablets, and something Threll couldn't immediately identify but that looked distressingly sharp. "Sir," Threll said, his voice rising slightly. "Exactly how many weapons are you carrying?" "These aren't weapons," Min-jun corrected politely. "These are tools. There's a difference. A knife is a weapon," Threll insisted. "A knife is a cutting implement," Min-jun countered. "I use it to open packages, cut cord, strip wires, prepare food. I haven't stabbed anyone with it." He paused. "Well, not in at least 3 years." Threll's skin changed to a concerning shade of purple. "Please continue surrendering your weapons. Tools. Whatever you call them." Min-jun moved to his cargo pants. The pockets there were even more numerous, built into the thighs, calves, and even the back of the knees. Out came more items. A compact saw, Allen wrenches, a glass breaker, a compass, fishing line and hooks, a sewing kit, matches in a waterproof case, a small container of oil, sandpaper, and a collapsible cup. "Why do you need all of these things?" A younger Vexillion officer named Liss asked, her voice full of genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. "Because you never know what you might need," Min-jun explained patiently. He was now working on pockets built into his belt. "My grandfather taught me that. He said the right tool at the right time can mean the difference between life and death. Success and failure. Eating and going hungry." The pile in the container was growing to absurd proportions. Other travelers in the security line had stopped to watch, creating a small crowd. A Kethrian merchant was recording the scene on a personal device. Min-jun could hear whispered conversations in a dozen languages. "Is that a human? I heard they were paranoid. My cousin trades with them, says they carry entire workshops in their clothing. Humans come from a death world. They need all those things to survive." Min-jun reached into a pocket hidden in his collar and produced a handcuff key and a razor blade. Threll made a sound like air escaping from a pressurized container. "You have pockets in your collar?" the security chief demanded. "Just a small one," Min-jun said. "For emergencies." "What emergency requires a razor blade hidden in your clothing?" You'd be surprised. The count had reached 43 items when Min-jun started on his boots. The heels were hollow and contained a small first aid kit, water purification straws, and high-energy food bars. The sides of the boots had slim pockets, with more lockpicks and a length of wire. 51, Threll announced after scanning the container. You were carrying 51 potentially dangerous items. Potentially useful items, Min Jun corrected. He spread his hands. That's everything. Can I proceed to my meeting now? Rating. Threll activated a deep penetration scanner, the kind usually reserved for suspected smugglers. He swept it over Min Jun's body. The device beeped, then beeped again, then began beeping in a continuous stream. You're still carrying metallic objects, Threll said slowly. Min Jun looked down at himself. Oh, right. Belt buckle has a hidden knife. Collar stays are lockpicks. Button on my jacket is a compass. Zipper pull is a fire starter. Shoelace tips are weighted for emergency use. And my watch has a built-in multi-tool. Your watch, Threll repeated weakly. And my ring has a handcuff shim built in, Min Jun added helpfully. Oh, and there are 3 more pockets I didn't empty yet. Inside left breast, inside right breast, and 1 sewn into the crotch area. Every eye stalk in the security station turned to stare at him. You have a pocket in your, Liss began, then stopped, apparently unable to finish the sentence. Most secure place on your body, Min Jun said with a shrug. No pickpocket is going to check there. Threll looked at the mountain of items in the container, then at his fellow officers, then at the crowd of onlookers, then back at Min Jun. For a long moment, the security chief said nothing. His 6 arms moved in complex patterns that Min Jun's cultural database suggested indicated deep confusion mixed with grudging respect and serious concern. I am going to need to consult with my superiors about this situation, Threll finally said. Please wait in the secondary screening area. Do not touch anything. Do not reach into any of your remaining pockets. Do not explain to anyone else what other items you might be carrying. Min Jun nodded and moved to the waiting area. Behind him, he could hear Threll speaking rapidly into a communicator, his voice tight with stress. Liss approached with a scanner and a datapad, her curiosity apparently overcoming her shock. Can I ask you some questions while you wait? She asked. Sure, Min Jun said, settling into an uncomfortable plastic chair. But fair warning. The answers are probably going to make your boss even more stressed. Liss sat across from Min Jun in the secondary screening room, her datapad balanced on her lower set of arms, while her upper arms gestured expressively as she spoke. Through the transparent wall, they could see Threll directing other security officers to carefully catalog and scan every item from the container. Why do humans carry so many things? Liss asked. My species evolved natural defenses. The Kethrians have armored skin. The Quellans have venom sacs. What do humans have? Min Jun smiled. Absolutely nothing. That's the point. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling, gathering his thoughts. My people evolved on Earth without claws, without fangs, without armor or venom or natural weapons of any kind. We weren't the strongest or the fastest. We couldn't fly or breathe underwater. We were just clever apes with good hands and better brains. Liss tilted her head in a gesture that Min Jun had learned meant interested confusion. So you created weapons to compensate? We created tools, Min Jun corrected gently. And then we kept creating more tools, and tools to make tools, and tools to carry tools. A human without tools felt naked and vulnerable. Because we were. So we started carrying things. Always carrying things. Rocks became hand axes. Sticks became spears. Animal skins became bags to carry more things. He gestured to his empty pockets. Clothing with pockets is maybe 500 years old in its current form. But humans have been carrying essential items for over 100,000 years. It's in our blood now. We feel wrong without our things. Through the window, Threll was holding up the plasma cutter and speaking animatedly into his communicator. Min Jun could see the security chief's skin cycling through several colors that probably indicated increasing stress. But why so many of the same type of item? Liz pressed. You had 3 knives, just in your jacket. Different knives for different purposes, Min Jun explained. One is for precision work, small, delicate cuts. One is robust, for harder materials. One has a serrated edge for sawing. You wouldn't use a surgical scalpel to cut rope, and you wouldn't use a machete to splice wires. He warmed to his subject, his hands moving as he spoke. Every human grows up learning this. My father taught me to always carry a knife and a light source, because you never know when you'll need to cut something or see in the dark. My grandfather said add fire-starting equipment because heat and light are life. My uncle said, add first aid supplies, because injury is inevitable. Liz made notes on her datapad. So, each generation adds more items? In a way. But it's also about personal experience. I'm a merchant ship captain. I've had cargo containers jam. I've had electrical failures. I've had to make emergency repairs in deep space where the nearest help was weeks away. Every problem I encountered taught me to carry the tool that could have solved it faster. A small crowd had gathered outside the screening room. Min Jun could see other humans in the group, and they were watching with amusement. One older woman in a maintenance jumpsuit caught his eye and patted her own pockets, which were clearly just as full as his had been. She grinned and gave him a thumbs up. Is this normal for all humans? Liz asked, following his gaze. More or less. Some carry more, some carry less. Depends on your job and personality. But yes, most humans feel uncomfortable without at least basic items. Keys, communication device, wallet, knife, light, the bare minimum to navigate modern life. Threll entered the room, his translator crackling with static that suggested emotional strain. Captain Park, I have consulted with the station administrator. Your items violate 17 separate security regulations. However, you technically did surrender them when requested, so you are not in violation of the compliance requirement. That's good, Min Jun said cautiously. However, Threll continued, our scanners still detect metallic objects on your person. The items built into your clothing and accessories. I am required to ask you to surrender those as well. Min Jun looked down at his clothes. Without the belt buckle knife, his pants would fall down. Without the collar stays, his shirt would look sloppy for his important meeting. The watch had been a gift from his daughter. If I give you my belt, I'll need something to hold my pants up, he said reasonably. And the collar stays aren't weapons by any definition. They're thin pieces of metal that keep fabric stiff. They're lockpicks, Threll countered. They can be used as lockpicks in an emergency, Min Jun agreed. They're also collar stays. My shoelaces hold my shoes on. My watch tells time. These things have primary purposes that aren't dangerous. Liz spoke up. Security chief? Perhaps we could note the items in his record, but allow him to keep them? They seem integral to his clothing function. Threll's skin flickered through several colors. The regulations are clear. All weapons must be surrendered. Then write an exception for tools that are also clothing components, Min Jun suggested. I'm not the only human who's going to come through here. We all carry things. You're going to have this same conversation 100 times a week once Earth's trade routes expand. The security chief was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, Min Jun could see a Kethrian merchant arguing with another security officer, gesturing at his own bag, full of trade tools. The officer was shaking his head firmly. I will consult with my superiors again, Threll said finally. In the meantime, you will proceed to your meeting under security observation. Officer Liss will accompany you. Min Jun stood and nodded his thanks. As he walked toward the exit with Liss beside him, he noticed the other humans in the crowd. They looked at him with understanding and solidarity. One younger man mouthed the words, "Stay strong," and patted his own suspiciously bulky jacket. The Galactic Commerce Hub had beautiful corridors with sweeping views of space. Shops and restaurants lined the main thoroughfare, offering goods from 1,000 worlds. But Minjun felt oddly naked without his tools. His hands kept reaching for pockets that were now empty. He caught himself patting his jacket 3 times in the first 5 minutes of walking, checking for items that weren't there. "You seem uncomfortable," Liz observed. "I am," Minjun admitted. "I feel unprepared, vulnerable, like I left my house without clothes on." "Like sounds card, but you are clothed. Empty pockets are worse than no pockets," Minjun said. "At least if I was naked, I'd know I had nothing. This way, I keep expecting to have my things, and they're not there." They reached the conference level where his meeting with the Quellan Trade Consortium would take place. Minjun straightened his collar, checking that the stays were still in place, and took a deep breath. "Wish me luck," he said to Liz. "I'm about to negotiate a major trade agreement with nothing but my words." "Isn't that how negotiations normally work?" Liz asked, confused. Minjun smiled. "You'd be surprised how often having the right tool at the right moment changes everything." The meeting with the Quellan Trade Consortium was going poorly. The Quellans were a species that resembled Earth's octopi, with tentacles that moved in hypnotic patterns and color-changing skin that displayed their emotions openly. Right now, their lead negotiator, Consortium Director Vesh, was a deep red that Minjun's cultural database identified as aggressive confidence. "The human government seeks access to the Kepler trade routes," Vesh said, his tentacles spreading wide. "But humanity brings little to the table. You are new to galactic commerce. You have few resources we cannot obtain elsewhere. Why should we grant you favorable terms?" Minjun kept his expression neutral, using every diplomatic technique he had learned. Earth offers unique manufacturing techniques, cultural goods that are new to the galaxy, and a strategic location between irrelevant systems. Vesh interrupted, his skin flashing orange with dismissal. "Captain Park, let us be honest. You need us far more than we need you. We are prepared to offer you access to the routes, but at a significant cost. 30% of all cargo value as transit fees." 30%? Minjun tried to keep his voice level. "The standard rate is 8% for established members. For probationary members like humanity, we require insurance against the risk you represent." Liz stood quietly by the door, officially there as security but clearly uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. Minjun had been in tough negotiations before, but the Quellans were openly exploiting humanity's newcomer status. Without better terms, Earth's merchant fleet would barely break even on the trade routes. The room suddenly shook. A low vibration ran through the floor, and the lights flickered. "Probably just a small seismic adjustment," one of the Quellan assistants said. "The station makes minor corrections to its position regularly." But the vibration grew stronger. An alarm began to sound, a pulsing tone that made Minjun's teeth ache. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Vesh's skin went pale blue. "That is not a positioning adjustment." The room's communication panel crackled to life. "Attention all station personnel and visitors. We have cascade failures in environmental systems in sections 7, 12, and 19. Fire suppression systems are not responding. All security personnel report to emergency stations. All other individuals shelter in place." Minjun was on his feet instantly. "Which sections are those?" Liz checked her datapad, her hands shaking slightly. 7 is a residential area. 12 is cargo processing. 19 is, she paled, the primary school wing. "There are children in section 19? Minjun asked sharply. "Approximately 40 students and 6 teachers," Liz confirmed. "The Vexillian response team is deployed, but..." She listened to her communicator. "They're reporting that their equipment is stored in section 12, which is burning. The backup equipment is locked behind doors that have lost power and are jammed shut." Minjun headed for the door. "Take me to Security Chief Threll. Now." They ran through corridors filled with confused travelers and stressed station personnel. The smell of smoke was already reaching the upper levels. Through viewports, Minjun could see emergency force fields activating to seal damaged sections. But the fields were flickering, suggesting power problems beyond just the environmental systems. Threll was in the central security office, surrounded by displays showing fires spreading through 3 sections of the station. His skin had gone completely gray, which Minjun guessed was not a good sign. "Captain Park," Threll said without turning, "unless you can suppress fires, open jammed pressure doors, or restart failed environmental systems, I cannot help you right now." "Actually," Minjun said, "I might be able to help you. What specifically do you need done?" Threll spun to face him. "What I need is impossible. The fire suppression system requires manual activation from inside Section 12. But the fires are too hot to approach without protective gear. The jammed doors in Section 7 need to be forced open to evacuate residents. But our hydraulic tools are also in Section 12. Section 19 has a coolant leak that will become toxic in approximately 12 minutes. But the leak is in a crawlspace too small for adult Vexillians to access." "Can you give me back my tools?" Minjun asked. "Absolutely not." "Regulations. Children are going to die," Minjun interrupted, his voice hard. "I can force open jammed doors. I can access small crawl spaces. I can patch coolant leaks. But I need my tools to do it." Threll's 6 arms moved in agitated patterns. "I cannot simply ignore station regulations because of an emergency." "Yes, you can," Minjun said flatly. "That's literally what emergency powers are for. You make the call, Chief. Follow the rules, and hope your people can handle it with what they have, or break the rules and get help from someone who came prepared." For a long moment, Threll stared at him. Around them, the security office was chaos. Reports flooded in, of spreading fires, trapped people, and failing systems. A junior officer reported that a child was now confirmed trapped behind a door in Section 19, separated from her class by a jammed bulkhead. "Give Captain Park his items," Threll said quietly. "All of them. And find every other human on this station. Tell them we need their help, and they can bring whatever tools they have." The items were returned in 3 large containers. Minjun immediately strapped on his belt, checked his jacket pockets, and selected tools with practiced efficiency. "Liss, you're with me. Threll, send me layouts of all 3 sections. I need to see the structural details." "I cannot allow you to enter a disaster zone," Threll protested. "Then come with us and make it official," Minjun said, already heading for the door. "But we're going. With or without permission." They reached Section 7 first. The pressure door was warped from heat stress, its electronic locks fused and useless. A crowd of Vexillian residents stood on the safe side, their skin showing the pale blue of fear. On the other side, Minjun could see more residents trapped, some injured. He pulled out his pry bar and examined the door's frame. "Liss, I need you and 2 others to pull when I create leverage. Threll, can you shut down the magnetic seals on this door? They're already offline." "That's part of the problem." "Perfect. That makes it easier." Minjun wedged the pry bar into the gap between door and frame. The metal squealed. "Now pull." 4 Vexillians grabbed the door's edge. Minjun levered with all his strength. Slowly, grudgingly, the warped door began to move. When the gap was wide enough, he switched to a folding wedge from his pocket, driving it into the opening. Then another wedge. Then a third. The door came open wide enough for the trapped residents to squeeze through. They emerged coughing and scared but alive. 1 section down, Minjun said, breathing hard. 2 to go. And we have about 10 minutes before that child in Section 19 runs out of air. They sprinted towards Section 19, collecting more humans along the way. Word had spread quickly through the station, and humans seemed to be materializing from everywhere. A maintenance worker named Sarah fell into step beside Minjun, her tool belt jingling with equipment. "Heard you got your stuff back," she said, breathing hard as they ran. "About time. What do we need to do?" Coolant leak in a narrow crawl space, child trapped behind a jammed door, and probably a dozen other problems we haven't found yet. Min-jun rattled off. Sounds like Tuesday, Sarah replied. 3 more humans joined them, 2 men and another woman, all carrying bags or wearing tool-laden vests. They looked like walking hardware stores. The scene at Section 19 was worse than Min-jun had feared. The entire corridor was filled with children and teachers, but one child was separated behind a transparent pressure door that had slammed shut and locked. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old, a young Vexillian whose skin had gone completely white with fear. She pressed her small hands against the transparent barrier, tears streaming down her face. The door's control panel is completely fried, a Vexillian technician explained desperately, and the frame warped when the temperature spiked. Even if we had power, it wouldn't open. Min-jun examined the door. The lock mechanism was visible through a small maintenance panel. He pulled out his tension wrench and lockpick set. I need complete silence. This is delicate. The corridor went quiet, except for the distant sound of alarms and the child's crying. Min-jun worked the lock, his fingers moving with practiced precision. He could feel each pin inside the mechanism, could sense when each one set into place. The lock was designed to prevent unauthorized entry, not to withstand someone who really knew what they were doing. The lock clicked. Min-jun grabbed his pry bar. Everyone pull together. 3, 2, 1. Pull. The door resisted, then moved, then opened fully. The child rushed out into her teacher's arms, sobbing. The teacher, her skin flooded with relief, looked at Min-jun with something like awe. The coolant leak, Liz reminded him urgently. 8 minutes. Where's the access point? They ran to a maintenance corridor where a narrow crawl space, maybe half a meter in diameter, led into the wall. Green coolant vapor was hissing from somewhere deep inside. The smallest Vexillian on the technical crew was too large to fit. I can do it, said one of the human men, a wiry guy who introduced himself as Chen. I've done confined space work before. Min-jun handed him a respirator from his medical kit, a patch kit from Sarah's supplies, and a small LED light. The vapor is toxic. Work fast. Get out faster. Chen disappeared into the crawl space. They waited in tense silence, watching the seconds tick down. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. Chen's voice echoed from inside the wall. Found it. Patching now. The hissing sound diminished, then stopped. Chen emerged backward, covered in sweat and coolant residue, but grinning. Patch will hold until they can do proper repairs. What's next? Section 12, Threll said, his voice tight. The fires are spreading. Our people cannot reach the manual activation panel for the suppression system. Sarah stepped forward. I have heat-resistant gear in my kit. How hot are we talking? 1-2 Breskinseta, 500 degrees in the direct approach corridor, Threll said. Survivable. For approximately 30 seconds before heat exhaustion becomes fatal. Then we do it in 25 seconds, Sarah said calmly. She pulled out a silvered emergency blanket and wrapped it around herself like a cloak. 2 other humans did the same, creating makeshift heat shields. Min-jun handed her his respirator, since Chen's was contaminated. They ran to Section 12. The heat hit them like a physical force even before they reached the damaged section. Through the warped doorway, Min-jun could see flames consuming cargo containers and structural elements. Where's the panel? Sarah shouted over the roar of fire. Threll pointed to a schematic on his datapad. 15 meters inside, left wall, protected cabinet. Sarah looked at the other 2 humans. Fast as possible. No hesitation. Ready? They charged into the inferno. Min-jun counted silently. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Through the heat shimmer, he could barely see them. 15 seconds. Sarah reached the cabinet. She used a multi-tool to pry it open. 20 seconds. She slammed her hand on the emergency activation button. Nothing happened. The power's dead. She screamed. Manual backup, Threll shouted. There's a mechanical lever below the button. 25 seconds. Sarah dropped to her knees, her silvered blanket beginning to char. She found the lever and pulled with all her strength. Something clicked deep in the walls. Foam began spraying from ceiling nozzles throughout Section 12. The three humans ran back out, their emergency blankets smoking, faces red from heat exposure, but alive. The foam smothered the flames quickly, turning the inferno into steaming, chemical-covered wreckage in less than a minute. Sarah collapsed against a wall, breathing hard. That was significantly hotter than advertised. Liz was already treating them for heat exposure, using medical supplies from 3 different humans' kits. Around them, the crisis was resolving. The fires were out. The coolant leak was patched. The trapped people were freed. Emergency crews were now able to access their equipment and handle the remaining problems. Min-jun became aware that they were being watched. The corridor was full of station residents and crew, all staring at the humans. The Quellan negotiators were there too. Vesh's skin cycling through colors Min-jun couldn't interpret. Threll approached, his 6 arms moving in a pattern that Min-jun's database suggested meant profound respect. Captain Park, on behalf of the Vexillian Confederacy and all residents of this station, I offer formal gratitude. Without your intervention and the intervention of your fellow humans, casualties would have been severe. Min-jun just nodded, too tired to do much else. His pockets felt right again, each tool back where it belonged. But more than that, he felt the satisfaction of having had exactly what was needed when it mattered most. Your tools, Threll continued, are not weapons. I understand this now. They are solutions you carry with you against problems you cannot predict. That's what I tried to tell you, Min-jun said with a slight smile. Humans just like to be prepared. 3 days later, Min-jun stood in the station administrator's office, with Threll, Liz, and members of the Vexillian Council. He'd expected citations, fines, maybe even a ban from the station. Instead, the mood was surprisingly positive. Captain Park, the administrator began. A elderly Vexillian, whose skin bore the marks of great age. We have reviewed all recordings and reports from the incident. The council has made several decisions. Min-jun braced himself. First, Security Chief Threll's decision to return your confiscated items was correct, and is being noted in his record as exemplary judgment under crisis conditions. Second, the security regulations that required confiscation are being completely revised. That was unexpected. Min-jun glanced at Threll, who made a gesture that might have been a shrug. The administrator continued. We designed our security protocols around species who evolved natural weapons. Claws, venom, biological advantages that can be controlled through regulation. We never considered a species that carries their advantages externally. The new human accommodation protocols will take effect immediately, Threll added. Humans may carry tools appropriate to their profession and personal safety. Upon request, they must demonstrate each item's practical purpose. But we will no longer treat preparation as paranoia or tools as weapons. Liz spoke up, her voice enthusiastic. I'm being assigned to develop training for all security personnel on human problem-solving approaches. We want to understand how your species thinks about challenges. More than that, the administrator said, we wish to hire human consultants to redesign our emergency response systems. Your people accomplished in minutes what our specialized teams could not do. We need that capability integrated into our station operations. A small screen activated, showing Director Vesh and the other Quellan negotiators. Vesh's skin was a neutral gray that Min-jun had learned meant genuine humility. Captain Park, Vesh said, the Quellan Trade Consortium wishes to formally apologize for our aggressive negotiating stance. We attempted to exploit your species' newcomer status. This was dishonorable, particularly after witnessing your crew rescue our delegation from Section 12. We are prepared to offer Earth access to the Kepler trade routes at standard rates. Another Quellan added. 8% transit fees, full membership privileges. Additionally, We wish to contract human emergency response teams for our own facilities. We will pay premium rates for this service. Toos. Minjun felt a smile spreading across his face. The Earth government will be pleased to hear this. I accept, on their behalf. Pending formal ratification. The meeting continued for another hour, working out details and contracts. When it finally ended, Minjun walked out with Liz into the main corridor of the station. The checkpoint where he'd been detained was now clearly different. The signs had been updated, and a whole section was marked Human Processing, Expedited Tool Declaration. You're famous, you know, Liz said. The recording of you emptying 51 pockets has been viewed over 300 million times across the galactic network. There are already merchants selling human-style jackets with extra pockets. Minjun laughed. Only 51? I thought the count was higher. Liz tilted her head. What do you mean? Well, I told Threll I was finished. And I was finished cooperating with the search. But I never actually emptied all my pockets. How many pockets do you actually have? Liz asked slowly. Minjun patted his jacket thoughtfully. 73. By my count. But 3 of them are hidden well enough that your scanners didn't find them. So I kept those to myself. A human needs some secrets. Liz stared at him, then laughed. A bubbling sound that her translator rendered as genuine amusement. You humans are going to keep surprising us. Aren't you? Probably, Minjun agreed. That's what we do best. Adapt, overcome, and carry the right tool for the job. They walked past a group of young Vexillians who were examining jackets at a clothing vendor. One of them was asking the merchant about maximum pocket capacity. The merchant, clearly capitalizing on the trend, was explaining the advantages of the human preparedness philosophy. Before you leave, Liz said, I wanted to ask you something. Why do humans say, it's better to have it and not need it, than to need it and not have it? I've heard several of your people use this phrase. Minjun stopped walking and looked at her seriously. Because humans evolved in a world that didn't care about us. Earth was harsh and dangerous. And it still is in many ways. We learned early that the universe doesn't provide what you need when you need it. You have to provide for yourself. And he patted his many pockets. These tools, these preparations, they're not about fear or paranoia. They're about respect. Respect for the challenges we might face, and respect for our own ability to overcome them. Every item I carry is a problem I've learned to solve before I encounter it. But you cannot prepare for everything, Liz said. Some problems are impossible to predict. 50. I would not people Souther. True, Minjun acknowledged. But you can carry the basic tools that solve the most common categories of problems. Something to cut, something to fasten, something to pry, something to see in the dark, something to start a fire, something to signal for help. Those simple tools can be adapted to solve thousands of different problems if you're creative enough. A young human girl, maybe 10 years old, walked by with her parents. Her jacket was covered in pockets, and she was proudly showing her father a new multi-tool. Minjun smiled. Seeing himself at that age, receiving his first real pocket knife from his grandfather. That's the other part of it, Minjun said. We teach our children to be prepared. It's not just personal survival. It's a cultural value we pass down. Every generation learns from the previous generation's experience. My grandfather taught my father. My father taught me. And I taught my daughter. We accumulate solutions across generations. And now you're teaching other species, Liz observed. I suppose we are, Minjun said. Though honestly, I think we're just sharing what seems obvious to us. Of course you carry tools. Of course you prepare for problems. Of course you help others when crisis comes. These things seem like common sense. Common to humans, Liz corrected gently. Many species evolved in easier environments, or with natural abilities that made tool carrying unnecessary. We never developed your drive to prepare, your need to carry solutions everywhere you go. They reached the docking area where Minjun's shuttle waited. Before boarding, he turned to Liz and pulled a small multi-tool from one of his pockets. It was nothing fancy, just a basic model with knife, screwdriver, pliers, and a few other implements. "Here," he said, offering it to her. "Your first tool. Keep it with you. You'll be surprised how often you use it." Liz accepted the gift carefully, her skin flushing with colors that indicated pleased gratitude. "I will carry it always. And when someone asks why, I will tell them I learned from a human that being prepared is its own reward." Minjun boarded his shuttle, settled into the pilot's seat, and began his pre-flight checks. Through the viewport, he could see the Galactic Commerce Hub, now a place where humans were understood a little better, where preparedness was respected rather than feared. His communicator chimed with a message from Earth. The government had received the Quellan offer and was ecstatic. Trade negotiations that were expected to take years had been completed in days. And all because a captain carried too many tools and knew how to use them. As the shuttle detached and he began the journey home, Minjun reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph he kept there. His grandfather, standing in front of the old workshop, tool belt around his waist, that knowing smile on his face. The old man had been right all those years ago. The right tool at the right time. Minjun said quietly to the photograph. "Thanks for teaching me, grandfather. The galaxy's finally starting to understand what you knew all along." He slipped the photograph back into its pocket, right next to the emergency beacon, the compass, and the 3 other items he'd never mentioned to station security. A human needed some mysteries. And more importantly, a human needed to be prepared for anything. Behind him, the Galactic Commerce Hub grew smaller against the stars. Ahead, Earth waited with new opportunities and challenges. And in his 73 pockets, Minjun carried exactly what he needed to face whatever came next. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but humans had learned long ago how to thrive in uncertainty. They carried their solutions with them, ready for anything, prepared for everything. It was the human way. And now, slowly, the galaxy was learning to appreciate the wisdom in that approach. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.